As I was just saying, super happy to be here and happy to be with you. And we're just gonna jump right in. And it's actually, it's funny how when you're looking for a piece of Torah, sometimes the perfect piece comes to you. And today is about the study of Torah. That's what we're going to learn about. This week's parsha is Chukat Balak. It's a combined portion this year, and this will be from Chukat, which is loosely about the red heifer, which is not at all what we're going to talk about today. But that's sort of your if you're looking for a concept touchstone for Parshat Chukat, it's all about the red heifer. And just personally, you might notice in the background here, in this little mug, which you may or not see, is actually my toy red heifer. Maybe I'll snag it before the end of class, sticking out of my organ mug, because my bar mitzvah was Parshat Parah, and the maftir of Parshat Parah is from Chukat. So I have like a personal attachment to this week's parsha, even though my birthday is in March and Shabbat Parah is in that time of the year. Certainly a personal connection to this parsha. So anyway, with all of that very not relevant to what we're learning about introduction, let's learn some Talmud. Great. Can everybody see this? Thumbs up? Awesome. So we're gonna jump down to the bottom. We're not gonna read the beginning of this sugya.
Could you move it a little bit over, because some of it is being.
That's probably on your end. I'll make it a little bit bigger.
Oh, okay.
That's probably on your end. But that's okay. We're in Masechet Brachot, the first tractate, and I say first sort of in air quotes, only in the sense that Talmud doesn't really function in a linear way, as you well know. And but if there was a first one, it would be Masechet Brachot, which is loosely about Shema and the Amidah and the blessings that we recite throughout the day and the year. And in this particular section, they're talking about the honor of Torah. And it goes through this sort of other story, cheerful face, tent of meeting, return to the camp, all interesting, great, but that's not where we're going to start. I want to start, and we're going to start here with Rabbi Yehuda, who is going to unpack a verse from Deuteronomy. And that verse is, and we're going to read most of it basically, which is Hasket Ushma Yisrael Hayom Hazeh Nihiyeta La'am, and then the rest of the verse is unto the Lord your God. So keep silence, Hasket, and hear Ushma Yisrael Hayom Hazeh, this day, Nihiyeta La'am, you have become a people, right? Nihiyeta comes from that same root of Haya, Yihye, to be. So this, keep silence and hear, this day you've become a people unto the Lord your God. And that last part, Lord your God, is cut off in the sense that that's not the part that the rabbis quote, but certainly part of the verse. And we know from our study of Talmud that the rabbis don't always quote the part that they're interested in. In this case, they do, but just because they didn't quote a part of a verse doesn't mean they don't care about it. And so we're going to unpack this verse in Deuteronomy through this sugya, right? Sugya being a unit of Talmud. Okay, but that is sort of way too much introduction, but useful, especially with that verse together. So can I get a volunteer to read what Rabbi Yehuda again began to say about Torah? Bichlod Torah.
I'll read.
Please, Jackie. Thank you.
And Rabbi Yehuda again began to speak in honor of Torah and taught, when Moses took leave of Israel on his last day in this world, he said, keep silence and hear, Israel. This day you have become a people unto the Lord your God. This is surprising. Was the Torah given to Israel on that day? Wasn't that the day at the end of 40 years since the Torah was given? Rather, it comes to teach that each and every day the Torah is as dear to those who study it as it was on the day it was given from Mount Sinai.
Amazing. Thank you, Jackie. So here we have the Rabbi Steinsaltz has given us some context, right? We're at the end of the Torah, and Moses is about to die. He's taking leave, and it's interesting the way you put it, right? Moses took leave of Israel. But Moses is going to die. He's at the end of his leadership. He's at the end of his life. And he's giving, Deuteronomy is his sort of final speech. He's retelling the story of how the people became the people, blah, blah, blah. And we have this moment where Moses is giving this wisdom. And the Gemara is sort of surprised by this, right? Which is, was Torah given to Israel that day? Like, why is Rabbi Yehuda quoting this verse? Right, we're in conversation with Rabbi Yehuda here. Why is this verse? Why is this the verse that's in honor of Torah? Right? Maybe it shouldn't we be talking about Mount Sinai? Right? Because this day at the end of Moses' life is at the end of the 40 years since they've been wandering in the desert. Shouldn't we be talking about Torah in the context of Mount Sinai? And here's how it gets explained. No, this verse is important to us. Right, that this idea that Torah matters to us, because we should learn that each and every day is dear to those who study it, and it was as it was given on that day on Mount Sinai. It's basically we should act in such a way in which we imagine that Torah is given on that day, that every day is this deeply powerful pinnacle, thunder and lightning moment that Torah was given. We should treat every day as important as that. What do people think? Does that resonate with anybody?
To me, it's, what do you have to say it for? I mean, it's something that's almost like Muvan Me'lah. Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, if
why is it obvious? Right, that's what you're saying, right? So why?
Yeah, I mean,
let me.
What they're always saying, that they're teaching Torah all the time. So why do you have to say specifically, just teach it?
Right, stop talking about the thing. Just do the thing.
Stop talking about it. I mean, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, actually. Right. This is something to, in other words, it's like I wouldn't even say you're decorating a cake and putting the icing on it, because I don't think it's doing that. I think what it's trying to do is improve one of the ingredients in the cake. Hey, I like this analogy. It just came to me. But it's like you're trying to say, well, I use the finest eggs in the cake. Or wait a minute, I use the finest butter, okay, because eggs are eggs. Butter could be different. And if I use the finest butter, and treat it with honor. This isn't just a cake that I threw at you.
Yeah, it's like it's using your analogy. It's like every day is my birthday. Act as if that cake was made special for me every day. Yeah.
Yeah, but what in some way, by saying as much as he's saying,
it's more like, I think I hear what you're saying, Sheila.
He denigrates it to a certain extent for me.
I hear you. It's more like Rabbi Yehuda in some way is like, doth protest too much, right? Like, exactly. You made the point. We don't need to be beaten over the head by it. I hear you, Sheila. Yeah. I get it.
I'm just wondering, okay, Bill and Bob, okay, and Jackie, you have not studied that much of this, right?
No.
Okay, so how do you feel about it? Approaching it when you see this now? I've studied this stuff so that, I can look at it a little differently. But how does it strike you is what I'd be curious about.
Me too.
Ron, you always talk. What about it?
Yeah, I've got something to say, and I'm not sure how it fits into this, but
say it anyway.
As always, I'm looking at the quote from Deuteronomy 27:9 and putting into context of where that came from. It was Moses explaining that Joshua, when they crossed the Jordan, that Joshua was supposed to etch the teaching into the stone. And And I think the important thing here is not so much the Torah, but that the people finally were a nation. They were going to conquer the other land. That they were going to go conquer Canaan as a people, not as stragglers and slaves and individuals. I think that's the important part here.
So I'm glad you brought up that context, Ron. And I'm gonna twist your words a little bit, right? Which is what I heard you say is people should remember what brought them together. They should remember what holds them together and where they came from on some level, right? Which is they became a people upon the exodus of Egypt and it's standing at Sinai. Don't forget what made you you. Now, Ron, I know you didn't quite say that, but to me, what I heard you say and what resonated with me was that sense. Again, why should we care about this? Why should we think about Torah every day? Helps us stay attached to where we came from. Yeah, Bob.
My thought on reading this is that that's the first day that they don't have Moses.
It will be,
So
yeah.
that it's a transition period, and that they are acting as a nation instead of being it. The head is changed. So to function again, they would be doing it as a people.
Yeah.
It's a transfer of power.
Yeah. Yeah. They're moving into a new era, right? And having Torah is an important piece of that. Yeah, Bill.
Weren't they all quite young? They've been traveling for 40 years. They've been dying off slowly, and a lot of them are still, babies, teenagers. So it's really hard to say what all this means.
Well, I mean, I think that's a really wonderful point, right? Like in the context of the Torah, the whole idea of the 40 years was that the generation that left Egypt that had experienced slavery would not be entering the land, but that everyone who had been entering the land was a free person, plus or minus, right? It's not exact, but I think that makes this point all the more so, right? They should, this is like essential passed down knowledge on some level. Would you say that, Bill, or no?
I don't know. I think a lot of them are still very, very young, and they hadn't really experienced all of this, because they all didn't die at the beginning of the 40-year thing. They all died gradually. So if they all died gradually, there's an awful lot of them. A lot of them must still be very, very young.
I think I think there's a real deep truth there. Yeah, Jackie.
And one of the things that we read as the story goes on is they still don't get it.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to get to them that they are a people as a group, that there's strength in the group. They're still, muttering among themselves and complaining about this and that without seeing the overarching truth that they're meant to see. They don't get it.
We are, in fact, a stiff-necked people from the very beginning.
With bells on.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Especially when these lessons haven't truly been internalized, perhaps because of their age, as Bill was saying, right? They don't have enough lived experience. Maybe what Rabbi Yehuda is teaching us is like all the more so, stay reminded, stay focused, remember, keep the things nearby, in this case, Torah, that's going to keep you grounded. I think there's something, let's keep going, but I think this is we're already starting in an amazing place. Great.
Torah is like the book of law rather than a book of education. It's like the Constitution. You can almost substitute that.
I think there's
on that paragraph. It changes later on. That's when you continue reading, it means something different.
Yeah, I think just like the Talmud, I don't think we can read Torah with a single lens of saying it's merely a law book, because there's so clearly deeper truths in there. But let's keep going. Bob, I know you raised your hand, so I'm also going to pick on you to read.
Rabbi Tanhum, son of Rabbi Hia of the village of Akko, said, "Know the Torah is indeed beloved as one who recites Shema morning and evening for his entire life and does not recite it in one evening. It is as if he never recited Shema. He cannot compensate for what he missed."
So this is an interesting paragraph, which is to say, for Rabbi Tanchum, who's the son of Rabbi Chia, right, who's from Akko, right, which is still a place that exists today. For him, right, being the nature of belovedness is a daily attention to the Shema, and that by not reciting Shema or missing our Shema, we can't make up for what we've lost, right? I have to be totally honest. I'm not sure that I like this. I think this is I don't think this is a powerful paragraph for the kind of theology I hold. But for Rabbi Tanchum, this clearly is important, and for him, expressing this daily ritual twice a day, which again I think is really important. Don't get me wrong. Is for him, this is how we manifest this. I don't want to spend a lot of time here because it's not where the Torah goes or the Talmud goes that I want to spend time on, but I didn't want to pretend it wasn't here either. It's something interesting. Bob, I know I had you read. Is there something you wanted to say as well?
Yeah, there's an emphasis here on Torah study, but these are mostly illiterate people.
Interesting. They're gonna say the rabbis themselves are probably generally literate in one way or another.
But the general population didn't read.
Yeah, I would be surprised if a majority of the population could read. Many of them could speak more than one language. One thing that's emphasized in the rabbis of the Tanaim is certainly memorization. So it isn't to say that they don't have intellectual capacity, whether or not they've absorbed Torah through something literary, right, through the act of reading, may or may not be the case for everybody, certainly.
But they read Torah twice a week.
Somebody read Torah twice a week.
They were supposed to be listening, but like today, we don't all listen while it's being read.
Sure.
So that,
Not everybody learns by listening.
Yeah.
correct.
David, you're still muted.
I'm sorry, thank you. As a historical matter, I think it's a little dangerous to say who could or couldn't read at that time, and depending on where also. I think there was a tremendous amount of literacy in Babel. Under the Persians, that seems to be historically true. Whether that's true in the West, quote unquote, in Eretz Yisrael at this time, I don't know. But just because the Middle Ages in Europe was highly illiterate doesn't mean that other parts of the world prior to the Middle Ages or even during were illiterate. So I'll just say that for whatever it's worth. Then the second point I would make is I think this is actually rather hard. As somebody who does recite the Shema, and I try to do it twice a day, I absolutely am willing to admit that I've missed doing it. I don't think that invalidates all the other times you did it, because I think what's the point? The point is to remind yourself. That's what reading it does for me anyway. If somebody wants to say there's a different point, fine, I'm willing to accept that. But I think he's rather hard to say that if you missed it once, it's as if you never did it.
So I think both points are incredibly well made. One is, you're right, I can't speak with any real authority on literacy in the ancient world. And so I think your point well made. And I agree with you. I think Rabbi Tanchum is being incredibly harsh here. And I don't agree with him. I think it's unfair more than anything else. And so yeah, it's an interesting thing to be plugged in here, because the rest of the section doesn't really speak to this. I think part of why this ends up here is because the word Shema is in the verse, right? Because the verse says Hasket Ushma Yisrael, And so because there's this relationship with Torah and this sort of like phrasing of Shema, that's how we're getting this quote. But again, it's not, doesn't feel, it feels like a later edited thing, like that somebody edited this paragraph in rather than it being a natural flow from the conversation. I don't know. I'm not an academic Talmud scholar. There are others who could answer this with greater authority than I. But yes, I find it also harsh. But we're not going to spend time with it because that's not the part I want to focus on. I do want to focus on this idea of studying Torah and Torah each and every day. And again, like this is Moshe talking at the end of his life, and this is our last class. And I want to sort of hold those themes here together. Can I get a volunteer to read this this paragraph here? The Gemara interprets.
I'll do it if no one
Please.
else. Okay, the Gemara interprets the word Haskate in this verse homiletically as an acronym of the words as, make, and kat, group. Form asu many groups, kitot, and study Torah, for the Torah is only acquired through study in a group.
I'm going to pause you there, Sheila, right? So, okay, what is it that they're doing? They're taking this phrase, haskate, and they're saying what it really means is asu kitot, that this word is
Wow.
really just the sounds should teach us about asu kitot. It's not the only answer, but one answer the Gemara is interpreting is that haskate means asu kitot, make groups, make classes, right? Because Torah is here it is, lefi she'en Torah nikneit ela bechavura, meaning to say Torah is acquired through group study. All right,
And
keep
that's
going.
why you have all the kollels and whatnot. That's
And also this class. Keep going.
this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, as Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina said, what is the meaning of that which is written? A sword is upon the boasters, Chabadidim, and they shall become fools, no alu.
That's
This
right
verse
here.
can be
You can see this.
interpreted-
Erev
Yeah.
shel.
No alu. That's a verb, though.
I'm sorry.
It's a verb.
What?
I don't understand it. Anyway, and they shall become fools. This verse can be interpreted homiletically, a sword upon the enemies of Torah scholars, a euphemism for the Torah scholars themselves who sit alone, bad bevad, and study Torah. And furthermore, those who study alone grow foolish. It is written here, no alu. And elsewhere it is written that after Miriam was afflicted with leprosy, Aaron told Moses, for that we have done foolishly, but no alu. And furthermore, they sinned due to that ignorance, as at the end of that same verse it is stated, for that which we have done foolishly, and for that we have sinned.
Great. Wait,
You
let me
basically-
Sheila, before we get well, yeah, are you gonna outline what happens in this paragraph?
In other words, they're trying to say you got to do it together. Doing it alone doesn't do much.
But it's
And-
not that it doesn't do much. It does something very specific.
It separates us from the rest of the group. We become.
That might be
foolish.
true, but that's not what the paragraph says.
Makes
Okay.
you foolish,
It does make you foolish, but what does it do? It causes,
ignorance.
and that causes sins.
In other words, if you boast, those who think that they know it all, okay, don't know it all, and they are not open to other knowledge. You get other knowledge precisely by what we're doing, discussing it together. You can't, you don't learn alone by yourself. You have to have at least two people.
Yes, and I think part of what it's saying is by doing it alone, we run the risk of misunderstanding something and leading someone astray. Let's break it down.
Yeah.
Let's go section by section here, right? So we have this verb, right? We're breaking down the first word of this verse, haskate, asu kito, make groups, study Torah in groups. How do we know this? Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Chanina, says, we have another verse in Jeremiah that says, Cherev el habadim v'noalu. Meaning to say, a sword is upon boasters, habadim, and they shall become fools, noalu.
When
What
you
does this
think-
mean? The sword upon the enemies, right? And again, they're saying this is a metaphor. We're not taking this literally. The verse can be interpreted homiletically. The sword upon the enemies of Torah scholars. Who is it that we would use swords against? We would use them against our enemies. What is the enemy of a Torah scholar? Us. We're our own worst enemies. And who are those people? They are the ones who, and they're taking this word and they're saying, badim should be understood as bad bevad. Those who are alone. Yoshvim bad bevad. Those who sit alone. So who is it an enemy of Torah scholars? The ones who only do it by themselves. And furthermore, right, we have this verb, na'alu, and elsewhere it's used for that which we have done foolishly, no'alnu, used by Aaron and Moses, right, when Miriam is afflicted with leprosy. So we have this sense of we've made a mistake, we've done something wrong. That's what this verb tells us, what it means, right? And therefore, when we put the pieces together, those who study alone are foolish in the sense that they run the risk of making a mistake. And here, v'lo od ela shechotim, they sin. And we know this from another verse in which the word foolish and sin are used together. So again, it's like we're linking chains of ideas here, right? We have this idea of people who are alone with fools, and fools, right, with sin. We've sort of built this chain of ideas. Jackie, David, and then Sheila.
Well, one of the problems with studying alone is you are limited to what you yourself know. And you don't, as you said before, you don't leave yourself open to learn something new. And also there's an aspect of arrogance in studying alone, because then you are masking the fact of how much you don't know. And people might look up to you thinking that you do know more than you know. And so they are misled. And so you are committing a sin of misleading somebody. And you're doing it intentionally.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I understood the sin to be different than the one you described, which is sort of a misrepresentation of ourselves, which is what you described, which I think is a reasonable read on this. The way I understood it, again, I'm not saying that I'm right and you're wrong, because I think you've made a really solid point, which is that when I make an assumption and I'm wrong because I'm studying by myself and there's no one there to correct me, I might make a ruling. I might tell somebody, oh, this is what it means, but it's not what it means. It means something else. And now they're going to make a mistake because I was arrogant.
Misled them.
I misled them. I want to tell one story, and then David, I'm going to come to you. One of my first teachers in rabbinical school, just this incredible teacher of rabbinics. Her name is Janet Davis, and she had this painting that she brought from home that she left in the Beit Midrash, and the painting, for those who know, let me do it this way. The painting shows a group of people carrying a large object and being happy. And she uses this painting to say that if you make one early assumption and it's wrong, you're going to interpret the whole thing based on that assumption. And she said that she originally got the painting at a store, and she asked the storekeeper what they thought the painting was about. And they said, oh, it's about Mardi Gras, that people are marching on this big Mardi Gras parade, and they're holding this big thing of jambalaya. And it was because this person made an assumption about what the painting was about. The painting was Simchat Torah, and that the large object was a Torah that people were marching. It was very obvious that it was Jews. But this person didn't know that. It's not their fault. They made an assumption early on,
Wow.
and they were able to plug all the other evidence based on their assumption. And she used that to teach us, you have to be really careful when you make an assumption early on, because it could lead you astray. I think about this painting all the time, and here I think it's the same thing, which is without other people's wisdom with you, you could make an early assumption and lead yourself astray deeply in the wrong direction. And it's not your fault per se, like we all do the best that we can. But the value of learning together is so that we are there to protect each other from making mistakes and from learning some deeper truths. All right, David and then Sheila.
So I'm going to just start by saying that I'm not disagreeing with anything that either you or Jackie just said, but I'm going to throw out a couple of situations to at least maybe introduce some nuance into this.
Love it.
And also suggest that in an age before printing, maybe the rabbis have an even bigger incentive to study together because there may not be a lot of texts to go around. On the one hand, and on the other hand, it's certainly true that in studying together, we can bounce ideas off one another, and hopefully, without saying whether an idea is per se right or wrong, we're at least trying to get somewhere closer to the truth, which would be easier to do in group study than it would be as an individual. On the other hand, I think we often just sort of accept this model because it's the model the rabbis give us, and maybe we don't think about it. But it seems to me, at least in an era after printing, or at least in a modern setting, we could say that there's a lot of value in studying in advance of getting together so that we perhaps know the written material better or at all. And then when we come together, we might have something more to say, therefore. And even if that studying in advance with a text or set of texts or multiple texts might prejudice us one way or another, if we're really open-minded, when we get together in that group and somebody else says, no, that's not what it means this, we could at least think, based on what I read, does that make sense? Maybe it does. Maybe I misread it. And again, maybe come closer to something like the truth than certainly we would if we only studied alone. But I just question whether it's literally foolishness to read the material in advance and be prepared for the class, so to speak, rather than just read it together. Now, we do that, of course, because this is a more casual setting and we're only doing it once a week. And you're bringing us the text. We have no idea what you're bringing us in advance. But query whether, if we actually had homework and you said, next week, read this and read some commentaries on it and think about what it actually means, maybe we'd have an even deeper discussion when we're brought together. So I'm not saying we don't get brought together. We absolutely have to bounce ideas off one another, et cetera, and so forth, if we're going to learn anything. But I don't think it's actually true that there's no value in studying in advance, even if that's alone. And it's not really alone. You're reading the ideas some commentator wrote, as well as the original text.
I love that nuance. I'm going to add a few pieces here. One is, right, in the context of the rabbis, they're probably not reading text with commentary. So we're already have so many additional steps that we're never really studying alone. Jews don't ever study alone because we have commentaries with us. So I love that nuance. The second thing is, and as you said this, the measure of, is there value in studying alone? That was the question you were answering, and I think it's a good one. And I think your answer is right, which is to say, yes, there is. The rabbis here are being very clear that Torah is not niknate, acquired, which I think challenges us to ask the question, what are the various relationships to Torah? And what does acquisition of Torah mean? I'm not going to offer a single answer, right? It might be, we together discovered a truth that we could not have done alone, and that's what acquisition is. It could be the kind of thing that until I can study alone, but until I have bounced it off another person, I can't truly understand it, and that's not acquisition. I don't know the answer here, but I do think you're right to say that their relationship to Torah individually, the learning we do individually, and what we do with groups are not mutually exclusive. They are in relationship to each other. So I think your nuance is very well made, and I'm really glad you brought it up. Sheila and then Bob.
I just keep thinking of science. People who make discoveries, if you don't share it with other people, because other people suddenly see things, just like we bounce off, you're bouncing off each other. You're taking into account different experiences, which these people really didn't have as much as we do today.
I'm not sure that I would make the last point, because certainly the rabbis in the Gemara in Babylonia lived in a very cosmopolitan context with lots of different kinds of people.
I'm talking about when they were in the desert and things like that.
Oh, certainly certainly the Israelites in the desert are not acquiring that much diverse experiences.
Yeah, Babylonia had a culture and a civilization and whatnot.
Exactly. All right, Bob.
I think there's another side to studying in groups, and that's group dynamics. If the more forceful opinion, or the supposedly more respected opinion, is the one that's coming, that doesn't mean it's the right opinion. And that if the group is pretty much equal, then I think then the bouncing of ideas off each other, where each one respects the opinion of the other. But there's a big stink currently going on in education at the college level, whether liberal ideology is being forced down the throats of young students. You could see that dynamic occurring in Torah study, where the given definition is the one that gets perpetuated as opposed to an alternate opinion.
Yeah, I think without commenting on current politics, because that's not a context I want to get into here, I do think your point is well made, in the sense that there are different relationships that happen when we study together. My approach has always been that I know some stuff, and you guys know some stuff, and we are learning this together, right? This is not a lecture. This is us learning a piece of text together. I know some stuff, you know some stuff. We all know different things. I used to teach a class, and half the class were Israelis. It was a Talmud class, and people who literally were living in Israel, not just Israelis who lived somewhere else, but people who were living in Israel. And I remember a piece of text we were learning, and it was a geographical in nature. And the people in Israel were like, "Oh, that's 10 minutes from us. Let us tell you all about this place that we're reading about." Without their experience, it doesn't matter how much I know or don't know. Their experience added something totally invaluable to our conversation. And that works when we see each other as you put it, I think very accurately, as equals. As that there's something to learn from each of us, that we each have something to offer to the conversation, and that not one person owns the entire truth. That doesn't negate the power of expertise. Certainly there are people who have expertises in lots of subjects whose wisdom we should listen to for a variety of reasons. But there is an important piece of coming to a piece of text, certainly in our tradition, and saying, we all have a piece of this, right? 70 faces of Torah. We each own our own perspective here in this and have something valuable to add to the conversation. I wholeheartedly agree with you. David, and then we're going to move on and read a little bit more.
I want to also thank Bob, because it brings up the other side of the coin I was raising, which is that sometimes group dynamics don't work well, and you have either groupthink or you have one idea that's so forcefully presented that nobody thinks about it, they just accept it. So there are those risks. So I agree with you also, Rabbi, that we have to come at these things not only open-mindedly, but respectfully. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why the minority opinion is often preserved, or there are multiple opinions in the Talmud. And sometimes, famously, there are all kinds of cases where you say, well, what's the actual halakha? They've had this whole discussion. They said it could be this way, it could be that way, it could be the other way, could be a different way. And somebody says, well, go look at Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll know what the halakha is. And I might go further and say, well, with all due respect, and it deserves respect, maybe we're living in a different era, and we have to think about whether one of the other opinions might be closer to what reality should be. So I'll just throw that out there as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the rabbis here, and I think and everything we've talked about is definitely pushing us away from a homogeny of thinking, right? We're not no group think. We're really challenging. The goal is to challenge ourselves towards greater truth. Let's read a little bit more. What was the part I wanted to do? We're going to skip a part because we're close to the end of the hour, and I want to sort of get to one piece, and then we'll have a conversation. And maybe I'll just skim through this, and then we'll have a conversation at the end, sort of reflecting on our year, which is here they give an alternative proof text for the word noalu. Here in this argument, they offer a different alternative. Keep silence and hear Israel, break katitu yourselves over the word of Torah, right? So they, instead of hasket being asukitot, here they understand it as katitu. This is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. As Reish Lakish said, from where is it derived that matters of Torah are only retained by one who kills himself over it? As it is stated, this is Torah, when one dies in a tent, which is from this week's Parsha. True Torah study demands a total devotion of one who's willing to dedicate their life in the tent of Torah. So what Reish Lakish is saying is, we're not just playing games here. This Torah is serious. It's part of what we're doing. What we're doing is that you should be willing to hold yourself to the most serious of stakes when we talk Torah. Torah matters. Now, I want to be really clear. While the rabbis do identify a number of things in which you should die over instead of rejecting Judaism, I want to just draw out the sense of scale here, which is often the rabbis will, and in Shulchan Aruch we see this and in other places, which is, how do we know how important a mitzvah is? Based on its potential punishment, right? And so if we think about that scale here, how important is Torah? Torah is worth dying over. Now, I'm not sure that I totally agree with that, whether I would make that recommendation to others, I would not. But I think what we can learn from Reish Lakish here is how deeply serious the stakes are. We're talking about our relationship with God and other human beings, and this matters. Ron, I'm going to give you. I don't want to get too deep in there. I'm going to give you a chance to talk, but I do want to. There's a few other things I want to talk about, but go for it.
I was just going to say that I think Reish Lakish is way off the playground here, because that quote is talking about impurity for somebody who comes into the tent. Has nothing to do with Torah study.
Correct. Well, yes and no. So yes, you are right about the context, 100%. This week's parsha is definitely about impurity. That's why the red heifer is referenced. And the reason why Reish Lakish makes this connection is that the verse itself says, Zot HaTorah, this is Torah, when a person dies in a tent. So that's why he's making this connection. It's not just, yes.
It's just saying that it came from the Torah. It's not saying this is the entire Torah. It's just saying it's another one of the mishpatim.
You are absolutely right about the context and what the Torah is generally saying when it says Zot HaTorah. That is not how Reish Lakish wants to read it. But you are correct. I'm not arguing that you're wrong. All right, let's keep going. Here's another alternative. Hasket u'shma Yisrael. First be silent, has, and listen, and then study intensively in order to analyze katet, to clarify the details. This is in accordance with the opinion of Rava. As Rava said, one must always study Torah and gain expertise, and only then analyze and delve into it. I think this fits very nicely into what you said earlier, David, right? Which is, you got to study, you got to warm up, you got to be ready for the class so that when you get in the group, then he can break it down and break it apart and find real truth in it. So I think Rava would agree with the argument you made before. In the school of Rabbi Yanai, they said, what is the meaning of that which is written in the book of Proverbs? For the churning of milk brings forth the curd, and the wringing of the nose af brings forth blood, and forcing wrath, apayim, brings forth strife. What does this mean? Well, regard to the beginning of the verse, for the churning of milk brings forth curd, in whom do you find the cream of Torah? With one who spits out the milk that they nursed from their mother's breasts over it, which is to say, one who struggles with all their might to study Torah. Why that euphemism means struggling with Torah requires greater study, I think. Rabbi Steinsaltz is giving us our explanation here. But I think the takeaway Rabbi Steinsaltz is offering us is Torah is not simple. It's not something we should just accept, right? Bob, you were making this point. We're not just receiving it. We struggle with it. That's desirable. We want to be struggling with it. That is a good thing. It keeps going. The wringing of the nose brings forth blood. Any student whose rabbi is angry with them the first time, and they are silent and does not react towards that anger, will merit to be able to distinguish between blood that is ritually impure and blood that is ritually pure. So again, is this what the Torah means? Absolutely not. But the rabbis are using this verse to say, recognize that silence is an important relationship to your teacher. Is this in contradiction to everything we've talked about so far? You betcha. We have been anti-silence so far. Here is making an argument for silence. Great, I love it. To the point we made earlier, minority opinions remain. And lastly, it uses the second verse, forcing the wrath, apayim brings forth strife. Any student whose rabbi is angry with them for the first and second time, and they are silent, merits to distinguish between monetary cases. So we have purity cases, monetary cases, strife and capital cases, the highest level of learning. As we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yishmael says, one who seeks to become wise should engage in monetary laws, as there is no greater discipline in Torah as they are a flowing well in which innovations constantly bring forth. I love this because, not the silence part, because I think that part has, I think, much more to do about the context of how rabbis were learning at the time. But I love this idea that it's not, that we know that there's places for innovation, and we should seek out those places where innovation lives. Torah innovation, right? Chidushim, new things. That engaging with these details, and again, monetary laws are about details between human beings, that brings forth innovation. And the story that keeps going, and it goes into other things. We're not going to read those here. So I want to say two things, and then we'll open it up for a few minutes. One is, I brought this text to us, not because I think it has all the answers, certainly not, but because it encourages us, it reminds us that studying together is of a tremendous value. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel this year, is that we studied in a group, not because we couldn't have studied out by themselves, but because there is something special, there's something powerful, there's something true about learning it together. And that's how I feel. That's the thing that I know that I've experienced this last year. It's not that I was here to teach, is that I was here to learn with all of you. And I'm deeply grateful for it. And the second, as we learned at the beginning of the sugya, which is that Torah is something that is alive in us each and every day. Today is the day that we received Torah from Sinai, because we were receiving it from one another, from each of you, from each of us, back and forth together. And so I end our class, this session, whatever, with a sense of tremendous gratitude, a tremendous sense of Torah that I know that I have received this past year, and my hope that you received it as well. And sort of just want to open it up for some reflection about what you feel like you got from this year, what you feel like you learned in this year. We started off with a couple of sort of subject matters where we unpacked it week after week. And then since the beginning of 5783, right, that's the year we're in, 5783, we have been exploring the Gemara through these connections to the Parsha. And so I just want to hear a little bit about, if you feel comfortable, what you feel like you've gotten from this year. What you feel like you've learned from our exploration of Talmud. Yeah, David.
So first, I do want to thank you for providing this forum for us. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity just to look at this kind of material afresh from a different perspective and hear everybody else's perspectives. I have to agree with you on that. I think that's much more powerful than strictly what I'll call in the box learning of this material, which is not to say that some historical reference or prior understanding isn't valuable. It absolutely is. I just think that we make a mistake if we assume that that just means that it requires so much deference that we stop thinking. So I really think this has been an opportunity for all of us, and certainly for me, to really think about this. And that's very personally enriching. So I really do appreciate that. And I hope even if this class is ending, we'll have an opportunity to learn together at some point in the future, whether it's whether you might be a visiting scholar again or in some other context. But I absolutely appreciated the opportunity to look at some of this material for the first time and some of it again from a different angle or many angles. So thank you.
Thank you, David.
I think we were learning more about the thinking of people. I mean, since I'm the one who's always critical about all that and about what they're thinking, whereas when I studied Talmud before, which was at the seminary, I mean, it was not in a class like this. So we were doing it on a scholarly basis. They were more interested in teaching us the law and not the process. What we learned, you did not pick out laws. Like if you study about the Hanukkah, you know, which way do you light the candles? We weren't really interested in the law, but in the background of the people, you know, and what their thinking processes, which, as I said, I don't like, but it was illuminating. I learned something from that. I saw the Talmud now in a, you know, in a different perspective. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it. Any other reflections on our year together?
Well, this is all new stuff to me. And just getting an explanation of what to look at and how things are going, and this is all new for me. As you probably know, I have a son who is Baal Teshuvah, and I have 6 granddaughters that all go to day school, so they have a whole different perspective on the world than what I do. So this is a place for me to kind of form a bridge between where I think the world is and where they think the world is. And it also provides for me a opportunity to have something to talk about. Like I can just mention to the girls last week that, oh, we're going to learn about spies this week, which is not a comment that they would ever have heard from me before. So it gives us a meeting place in our relationship. And I think it is, their perspective is there's only one kind of Judaism. And my perspective is you kind of have to know where there's all kinds of different Jews in this world, and not everybody is from the same place you are, but they're still Jewish. So my Jewish value has gone up just from the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you.
Thanks,
I mean
Bob.
that you're studying.
Thanks, Bob.
The fact that I am attending, the fact that they know that I'm attending a class on Talmud, whether I gain anything or not, just the fact that I attended a class on Talmud improves my status.
That's great.
That's a good reason to take a Talmud class. I'm glad you're here, Bob. Jackie.
Yeah, I find the one of the values is it provides me a forum where other people get together to think. And I think that is wonderful. And as a senior citizen, for whom our society does not always have too much respect, and to have the opportunity to gather the thinking processes of other people within a situation where there is respect all around. And I think I appreciate having this forum and this place to allow us to exchange ideas. Recognize that those ideas have been recognized a very long time ago, and they're still ideas that have value in today's world. So I thank you for providing this forum.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks for being here. Any other reflections? Well, I'll just end our class with, as I said before, a tremendous level of gratitude, and I'm excited for future opportunities to learn together, which I know I've already talked about with Rabbi Hal and other members of the B'nai Yeshurun team, and I'm excited to explore those in the future.